I never imagined I'd be the kind of woman who would write something like this. Not because I think I'm innocent, but because for most of my life, I believed I was right. People love clean stories. A hero. A villain. A clear line where everything went wrong. My marriage didn't break like that. It eroded. Quietly. Slowly. With years of silence that looked like stability from the outside. When I stood in that courtroom and asked for half of everything, the company, the ranch, the money, people stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Like I was greedy. Like I was heartless. But no one saw the years that came before that moment. No one saw how much of myself disappeared while Ethan built his empire. And if I'm being honest, neither did he. I met Ethan Walker in a lecture hall that smelled like dry marker ink and burnt coffee. Night classes. Construction management. He sat in the back, boots dusty, shoulders wide, notebook neat in a way that surprised me. He didn't look like the other men there. He looked like someone who worked. I was 22. Ambitious. Restless. Studying communications and dreaming of a life bigger than the one I grew up in. Ethan talked about beams and loads and foundations like they were living things. I edited his papers. He explained why buildings stood. We balanced each other. Or at least, that's what I told myself. When we married, we had nothing. A bad apartment. Cheap furniture. Shared dreams. Those early years were loud with hope. We counted nickels. We celebrated tiny wins. I framed a stupid receipt from a lumberyard for our first anniversary because it symbolized what we were building together. Back then, we meant something. The company started small. Really small. Ethan took jobs no one wanted. Driveways. Concrete patches. Debris hauling. He came home exhausted, sunburned, smelling like dust and sweat. I listened. I encouraged. I reminded him why he started. People forget this part, the invisible labor. The listening. The emotional glue. When he cried the first time he covered payroll for 10 men, I was the one sitting beside him in that truck. I held his hand while he shook. I told him he was doing something that mattered. That company didn't rise in a vacuum. It rose on sacrifices, mine included. As the years passed, the work got bigger. Steel frames. Shopping centers. Hospitals. Schools. And Ethan changed. Not in a dramatic way. In a subtle one. He became quieter. More inward. More married to the rhythm of his mornings. Coffee at 5:30. Boots by 6. Prayer for safety. Repeat. I adapted. Or rather, I shrank. Vacations disappeared. Conversations shortened. My career plans dissolved into later. I became the person who kept the home running so he could keep building. And for a long time, I told myself this was partnership. Until I realized I was living in the background of someone else's legacy. The ranch was sacred to him. Texas land. His grandfather. His father. Every story tied to dirt and wind and fences. I respected it, truly. But I was always a guest there. Never an owner. Never a priority. When the business struggled, the ranch saved him. When the business thrived, the ranch reminded him not to brag. I thought marriage worked the same way. I was wrong. The first time I noticed the shift, it wasn't emotional. It was practical. Numbers. I started asking questions. At first, they were innocent. Or at least I believed they were. How much did machines cost? How did depreciation work? What happened during slow months? Ethan answered, but something changed in his eyes. Like trust was suddenly a calculation. He didn't realize what those questions meant to me. They weren't about greed. They were about fear. Because when you wake up one day and realize everything you've built is technically someone else's, you start counting. I'd been married to him half my life. But on paper, I was nothing. No ownership. No control. No safety net. So yes, I started learning. Writing things down. Understanding the structure of his world. He called it paranoia. I called it survival. And the more I learned, the clearer something became. If this marriage ever ended, I would walk away empty-handed. After everything I'd given. Then his father died. Grief hollowed him out. He retreated further into work and silence. I tried to reach him, but grief made him unreachable and invisible to my own loneliness. That's when I met Derek. He worked with Ethan, knew the business, understood the weight of it, and more importantly, he listened. I didn't plan for anything to happen. I swear that. But emotional affairs don't announce themselves. They slip in through cracks you didn't know were load-bearing. Derek saw what Ethan didn't.
How alone I felt.
How invisible. How scared. And once someone names the thing you've been pretending not to feel, it's already too late. I didn't wake up one day wanting to destroy my marriage. I woke up wanting to feel chosen, wanted, valued. And yes, eventually that turned into something I can't defend. But it didn't start as betrayal.
It started as neglect.
By the time Ethan started watching me like I was a stranger in my own house, I was already planning my exit. Quietly.
Carefully. Strategically.
I met with lawyers. I learned the rules. I prepared. Because love doesn't protect you in court. Paper does. And I believed, truly believed, that half of what he built was mine. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I refused to leave with nothing. I didn't know he was preparing to. I didn't know he was moving pieces I couldn't see. I thought I was ahead of him. I thought I was smart. I thought saying, I built his life too, would be enough. I was wrong. But that realization came later. Much later. By the time Ethan started watching me differently, I had already convinced myself I was the smartest person in the room. That sounds cruel when I read it back. But at the time, it felt like survival. When a marriage reaches the stage where silence becomes normal, you don't wake up panicking. You wake up calculating. You start measuring distance instead of closeness. You start planning for the day when we quietly turns into me. Ethan still woke up at 5:30. Still drank his coffee the same way. Still kissed my forehead out of habit. From the outside, nothing had changed. From the inside, everything had. Derek became my anchor in a way I didn't admit to myself. He knew the business, the machines, the contracts, the way Ethan thought. But more importantly, he understood me. Or, at least, he understood the version of me I had become. The woman who put her ambitions on hold. The woman who edited speeches but never gave one. The woman whose value was assumed, never acknowledged. I told myself I wasn't cheating. Not at first. I told myself this was emotional support. A bridge. Something temporary until Ethan and I found our way back to each other. But deep down, I already knew the truth. You don't hide something unless you know it's wrong. I became careful. Phones face down.
Calls taken in the hallway.
Lunches that ran long. Ethan noticed, of course he did. He just didn't confront me the way I expected. He grew quieter.
Sharper.
Like a man measuring something invisible. When I saw him standing in his office doorway one afternoon, watching me photograph a document, my heart nearly stopped. I laughed it off. Called him paranoid. It worked, but something shifted in his eyes that day. Something closed. At the time, I thought I'd won that moment. Now I know better. I started keeping notes. Not because I wanted to steal from him, but because I wanted proof of my contribution. I wanted to be ready when the time came. I told myself every wife does this. That understanding finances was responsible. But the truth was uglier. I was preparing for war, while pretending it was housekeeping. The affair became physical the same way everything else in my marriage had happened. Quietly, without fireworks. A hotel near the freeway. Neutral ground. No memories. No meaning. I remember staring at the ceiling afterward, not feeling guilt the way movies promised. Just a strange calm. Like I'd crossed a line that had been waiting for me. I told myself this was the last step before freedom. What I didn't realize was that I'd just stepped into a trap I couldn't see. Ethan started pulling away emotionally, but he didn't explode. That scared me more than anger would have. Men like him don't yell. They retreat. They observe. They prepare. I noticed small things. Passwords changing. Documents moving. Conversations ending faster than they used to. When I asked him what was wrong, he said nothing. When I accused him of being distant, he said work was heavy. And I believed him because believing him meant I didn't have to face the possibility that he knew. Derek, on the other hand, grew bolder. He talked about the future, about how things should be. He told me Ethan trusted too easily, that the company could be run better, that my role in Ethan's life had been undervalued. Those words fed something hungry inside me. I started imagining a life where I wasn't just the wife, where I had power, ownership, security. Derek talked about numbers like they were promises. I listened. I met with attorneys. More than one. I learned phrases like community property and just and right. I learned how judges think, what they value, how narratives matter. They told me something that hardened my resolve. In long marriages, courts recognize non-financial contributions. That sentence became my shield. I wasn't taking from Ethan. I was reclaiming what I deserved. The more confident I became, the more blind I grew. I didn't see how calm Ethan had become, how careful, how unbothered. I mistook silence for weakness. I mistook restraint for ignorance. That was my biggest mistake. The night I found a manila folder in his truck, my chest tightened. I didn't open it.
Didn't need to.
Men like Ethan don't carry paperwork casually. But by then, I was too committed to stop. Fear had already turned into momentum. I doubled down. More meetings. More documentation. More reassurance from Derek that everything was going according to plan. I told myself Ethan was behind. I was wrong. The day the papers were ready, I felt powerful.
Calm.
Prepared. I asked for half, not as a threat, but as a statement. The company. The ranch. The money. I believed the law would protect me. I believed fairness would be enforced. I believed Ethan would fight and lose. I didn't expect him to agree. When he said yes in court, my breath caught. For one beautiful, dangerous moment, I felt victorious. I looked at him and thought,
he finally understands.
I didn't see the folder. I didn't see the judge's expression change. I didn't realize the game had already ended. Not in my favor.
The room shifted before I understood why.
Papers moved. Faces tightened. The air grew heavy. And then the truth arrived. Quietly, mercilessly. Structures.
Trusts.
Transfers. Assets I thought were mine evaporated in front of me. The ranch, gone.
The machines, not his to give.
The company, hollowed out legally. I felt something inside me collapse. Not anger. Not grief. Recognition. I wasn't outplayed because I was greedy. I was outplayed because I underestimated the man I married. I thought builders only worked with concrete. I forgot they also understand foundations. And by the time the judge looked at me with something dangerously close to pity, I knew. I hadn't just lost money. I'd lost the story I'd been telling myself for years. And the worst part? Ethan hadn't raised his voice once. When the judge finished reading, the room felt smaller, like the walls had leaned in to listen. I was still holding the pen. That detail haunts me more than anything else. The ink was fresh. My signature sat there, slightly crooked, like my hand had known before my mind did that something irreversible had just happened. Ethan didn't look at me. Not once. He stood there with that same calm expression he wore on job sites when something went wrong but panic wouldn't fix it. The expression of a man who had already measured the damage and knew exactly how much could be salvaged. I had mistaken that calm for surrender. I understand now how dangerous that mistake was. The judge spoke slowly, deliberately, like every word had weight. Assets restructured prior to filing. Ownership legally transferred. The ranch held in an irrevocable family trust. Each sentence stripped something from me. Not just money.
Certainty.
My attorney leaned toward me, whispering frantically, flipping pages that suddenly meant nothing. The binder that had once felt like armor now looked thin. Useless. I kept waiting for Ethan to flinch, to react, to look at me with anger. But he didn't. And somehow, that hurt more than rage ever could. The moment that broke me wasn't when I realized I wouldn't get half. It was when I realized how clean it all was. No loopholes. No hidden tricks. No illegal maneuvering. Just preparation. Ethan hadn't cheated the system. He had respected it and used it better than I ever could. When he stood again and calmly offered a settlement, a fraction of what I demanded, the room went silent. I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded, because the truth had finally cornered me. If I fought him, I would lose more than money. I would lose time,
Dignity.
what little control I still had. So I signed. Again. Outside the courthouse, the Texas sun felt cruelly bright. Derek was pacing, phone already in his hand, whispering aggressively into it. His confidence had cracked. I could hear it in his voice. For the first time since I met him, he looked scared. I felt nothing. Not anger. Not comfort. Just distance. That scared me more than his panic. The days after the ruling passed in a blur. People talk about divorce like it's a moment. It isn't. It's a slow dismantling of identity. The house echoed. My phone went quiet. Friends stopped calling. The checks arrived. The money everyone said would set me up. It felt heavier than it looked. Because money without belonging is just a reminder of what you lost. Derek didn't last long after that. Ethan didn't fire him dramatically. There were no confrontations. No yelling. His access was revoked. His partnership dissolved. His reputation quietly collapsed. Word travels fast in industries built on trust. Clients stopped answering Derek's calls. Vendors hesitated. The man who once spoke about the future with such confidence now couldn't secure a meeting. He blamed me. Of course he did. He said Ethan had manipulated me. That the system was rigged. That I should have pushed harder. But the truth was simpler. Derek had mistaken proximity for power. And I had mistaken attention for loyalty. One night, weeks later, Derek stood in my kitchen shouting about lawyers and appeals and revenge. I listened. And realized I didn't recognize the man in front of me. He wasn't my savior. He wasn't my partner. He was just another person who thought he could take something that wasn't his. I asked him to leave. He laughed at first. Then he saw my face. And he left. That was the last time I saw him. Ethan never contacted me again. Not once. No texts. No calls. No closure. At first, that enraged me. How dare he move on so cleanly while I sat with the wreckage? But eventually I understood. Closure is a gift you give yourself.
And he didn't owe me one.
Months passed. I downsized. Sold furniture. Moved into a place that didn't echo so loudly. I tried dating. Every conversation felt shallow. Every man wanted a version of me that no longer existed or never truly had. At night, I replayed moments I'd dismissed for years. Ethan quietly fixing things without being asked. Ethan listening without interrupting. Ethan trusting without questioning. I had called that boring. I had been wrong. The ranch haunted me most. Not because of the land itself, but because of what it represented. Legacy.
Continuity.
Something that didn't need applause. I had tried to extract value from something that was never meant to be divided. And in doing so, I had revealed how little I truly understood the man I married. One evening, I ran into Tony, one of Ethan's longtime employees, at a grocery store. He looked surprised to see me. Polite. Guarded. We exchanged small talk. Then, he said something that lodged itself deep in my chest. He's doing good, Tony said. Company's steady. Ranch looks better than ever. I nodded. And for the first time, I felt something close to peace. Not because I was forgiven,
But because he was okay.
People online love to ask, do you regret it? That's the wrong question. Regret implies a single wrong choice. What I regret is the slow erosion of gratitude. The way I stopped seeing partnership and started seeing entitlement. The way I believed contribution only mattered if it was visible. I didn't lose everything in court. I lost it long before that. I lost it the day I stopped believing quiet effort counted. The day I believed love should come with invoices. The day I mistook strategy for strength. Ethan once told me something years ago, sitting on the porch at the ranch. You don't brag to land, he said. You respect it.
I didn't understand then.
I do now. Some things aren't meant to be divided, demanded, or defended. They're meant to be protected. I tell this story now not to excuse myself, not to vilify him, but to warn anyone who believes love is a ledger. Because when you start counting what you think you're owed, you stop seeing what you already have. And sometimes, by the time you realize the difference, the foundation is already set, and you're standing on the wrong side of it.